Welcome to Faith and Freedom. For the next few minutes, we hope to inform, inspire, and encourage you as we discuss the legal victories and challenges to your fundamental freedoms and religious liberties. Faith and Freedom comes to you from Liberty Counsel, a civil liberties education and legal defense organization. Join us now as Matt Staver, the President and General Counsel of Liberty Counsel, explains the latest legal issues all across this country in the courtrooms of America. Liberty Counsel is winning the battle for your constitutional freedoms.
Herman Cain's ascendancy in the GOP primary polls puts to rest the left's lie that the Tea Party movement and larger conservatism is somehow racist. I'm Matt Barber, Vice President of Liberty Counsel Action, in today for Matt Staver. And joining me as our guest in studio today is Ron Miller, who is Associate Dean with Liberty University's Helms School of Government. And welcome, Ron.
Glad to be here.
Wanted to discuss with you a little bit today. I've been following with great interest Herman Cain and dynamic, explosive personality, very fascinating orator to listen, has some very novel and interesting ideas that are stirring up some excitement in the Tea Party movement among conservatives, the base of the Republican Party, certainly. And he is now neck and neck in the polls with his co-frontrunner, Mitt Romney. Just what is your take on what has launched Herman Cain in the polls, one, and two, as I mentioned in my opening comments, doesn't this kind of undermine this notion that the Tea Party movement and conservatives, and certainly the Republican Party, larger Republican Party, are a bunch of bigoted backwoods racists?
In fact, if you look at the surge that he has in the polls, it's coming from the Tea Party movement and from conservatives largely, people that they think of as being more establishment Republicans or whatever term you want to use are definitely looking at other people, but he's getting his surge from the grassroots. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. First of all, he's not a career politician. And as such, he speaks very straight from what he believes. So there's sincerity, there's authenticity. And as a businessman, he's a person about solutions. So he's going to tell you what he wants to fix and how he's going to fix it. That appeals to people. His background as a businessman, a very successful businessman, is also something that people look at because of the economy. They're looking for some actual experience rather than on-the-job training when it comes to things that are dealing with the economy and jobs. So all of those things have come together. And the race issue is really an interesting dynamic in the sense that people in the Tea Party movement are looking at his ideas, and they don't care about the color of his skin. And what's ironic is that the liberals are so flustered with this that they can't seem to deal with it, so they've come up with a narrative that says that the Tea Party movement is somehow compensating for their racism by supporting Herman Cain. And that's got to be one of the more laughable things I've heard in politics.
Yeah, the cognitive dissonance here is I was watching a rabid leftist, Janine Garofalo, on the Keith Olbermann show. I don't know, is it on the internet, on that current TV
or something like that?
Al Gore's a little get up, and I don't know, maybe 12, 15 people at a time watch it. But nonetheless, they were bouncing back and forth this notion that certainly the left, they love to cry racist. And then they come up with racist terms like, Herman Cain's just an Uncle Tom. I mean, offensive, horribly racially charged ad hominem attacks against people like Herman Cain. But to hear her say that Herman Cain, one, is a racist, essentially, and that, two, that the Tea Party is just, as you mentioned, compensating for their racism by it's some secret, covert conspiracy to prove to the world, or at least trick the world into believing that we're not a bunch of racists. I thought it was inane, for one thing, but it just, I think, underscores, as you mentioned, the desperation that we see coming from the left as Herman Cain is moving up in the polls.
It's also condescending to say that because you have a particular skin color, you are obligated to think and act a certain way. I don't know if they realize just how patronizing that is, and that somehow we're incapable of thinking for ourselves, if you will, without the...
Are you offended by that? I mean,
yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because they're telling me that I need their guidance, their counsel, their wisdom in order to make it in the world. And that is not the history of black Americans. You go back to Frederick Douglass, a man who lived in slavery, yet broke out of slavery, didn't have a formal education yet, became one of the greatest orators and statesmen of our time. Our history is a history of being able to overcome impossible odds because we believed in the promise of America, we believed in God and what He gave us to accomplish on earth. And it seems to me that somehow they're trying to replace God and our own self-sufficiency with their omnipotence, if you will.
Yeah.
And
it's elitism.
It is pure elitism, absolutely.
Yeah, and we see it on display now. Obviously, Liberty Counsel, Liberty University, we are 501c3 nonprofit organizations. We do not endorse or oppose any particular candidate or candidates. But it's interesting to me, the reality that in looking back at history, it is the Republican Party that has been at the forefront of fighting racism and fighting for equality, racial equality, with Abraham Lincoln, obviously, doing away essentially through his efforts with slavery. The civil rights movement was led by Republicans. It was Democrats that opposed it in large part. There were, intermixing of votes and so forth. And even my understanding is that Martin Luther King Jr. was a registered Republican. Most people don't know this. And let me ask you this, all that to say, the African American community at large, don't they typically have, generally speaking, more socially conservative principles as a community?
Absolutely, and I'll give you one prime example. I arrived here from the state of Maryland, which I lovingly refer to as the People's Republic of Maryland, and they had a bill before the General Assembly to legalize same-sex marriage in the state of Maryland. And once that got out of the more conservative, and I use that term very loosely, the more conservative body of the General Assembly, the Senate, I was convinced that it was all but certain that this bill was going to pass. But it failed by 2 votes, and it failed because the black community, the churches, rose up, and they basically told the representatives from that area, you will not do this. And they were very direct. They said, I can't vote for this because my constituents don't want it.
Wow.
And so it's very, and California was an example too. Remember,
yes.
with Proposition 8,
Mm-hmm.
They voted overwhelmingly for Barack Obama, and in the very same election voted for traditional marriage.
70% of the African American community voted for natural marriage, voted against the radical redefinition of marriage. Now, yet the elitist left, progressives, if you will, President Obama included, are clearly swimming upstream. They're at odds with many of the minority Hispanic communities, the African American community, many of the minority communities that they purport and presume to represent. They are completely at odds with those communities.
Yes, but they've got one thing that they've been exploiting for generations, and that is the fact that, like any immigrant group or minority that comes into America, they are striving to achieve. And every immigrant group that's ever come to America has basically adopted the American principles of self-reliance and free enterprise. Well, they've not been allowed to do that because they've been told constantly that they don't have the ability to do it because society is not fair. And they've bought into this lie, and as a result of buying into the lie, they've really held themselves down. And this is what led some comments recently by Herman Cain about the black community being, quote, brainwashed, unquote. Yeah. Harsh term. And I don't know that I would go down that path, but I would also say that they need to take a more critical look at history and see where some of the activities within political parties occurred as far as civil rights and freedom and emancipation.
Look at true history rather than the misrepresentation of history and the revision of history. As we see, we only have about 30 seconds or so left. Why do liberals hate conservative blacks?
Because we represent the repudiation of the lie, and they're afraid that if we become stronger, then they will lose their grip. And if they lose their grip, they'll never get it back.
Well, I agree, and thanks for sharing with us today, sharing your insights, your thoughts. Folks, at Liberty Counsel, we continue to advocate conservative principles, Christian principles, and we believe that these principles cross racial barriers, racial lines, certainly party lines, and we will continue to advocate on behalf of God's truth and advocate for biblical principles in public policy. We encourage all of you, whatever your race may be, conservatives view are colorblind when it comes to race in pushing for conservative and principles in public policy in our larger culture. We encourage you to visit our website at lc.org to learn how you can become part of Liberty Counsel's ministry. Give us a call at 1-800-671-1776 to learn more about Liberty Counsel. Help us as we work for biblical principles in our larger culture.
You have been listening to Matt Staver of Liberty Counsel. Our hope is to encourage and inspire you to stand up for your faith, family, and freedoms. We can accomplish a lot when we work together. Get informed and get involved today. Sign up for our free monthly newsletter, The Liberator. We will send it out to you free of charge. Stay informed with our Liberty Alert email update. Just click on the website at www.lc.org or call us at 1-800-671-1776. Tune in next time to learn more about your rights right here on Faith and Freedom.